Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk-On. I'm your host, Max Chadwick. So last week we did the top 10 quarterbacks in college football heading into the 2023 season. This week, the top 10 running backs in college football heading into 2023. This has nothing to do with how they are as prospects in the 2024 or 2025 NFL draft. This is strictly how good they are in college football. And I have to say, I put out this list at pff.com, which you can go check out if you want to. That list came out a few months ago. My opinions have changed slightly on this, so if it looks different to you, that's because I have changed my opinions a little bit on some guys as I go back and watch more tape on all of them. But let's kick it off with the number 10 running back in college football heading into next season, and that is, in my opinion, Will Shipley from Clemson, former 5-star recruit, really productive as a sophomore this past season. He had a combined 71 first downs and touchdowns on the ground, which was 8th among Power 5 running backs. The issue with Will Shipley is that he's not really going to break a lot of tackles. He only forced a missed tackle on 17% of his carries last season, which was tied for 57th in the Power 5. However, he's a decisive runner, and he's got pretty good vision, and he's prone to the incredible hurdle every now and again too. So at number 10 is Will Shipley. At number 9 is the first of 2 Michigan running backs on this list. That is Donovan Edwards from, like I said before, Michigan. He was expected to be kind of the lead back for the Wolverines this upcoming season, but Blake Corum, who we'll get to later, surprised everyone when he came back to school for yet another season. But Edwards is the best number 2 running back in college football right now and a top 10 running back in the country. He led all Power 5 running backs this past season with 7.1 yards per carry. His 87 PFF grade tied for 5th among all Power 5 running backs. And when Corum went down with a knee injury late in the season, Edwards really stepped up when it mattered most. So in the last 3 games of the season for Michigan, against Ohio State, Purdue, and then TCU in the playoff game, he ran for a combined 520 yards and averaged 7.4 yards per carry. 520 yards in the last 3 games for Donovan Edwards. And massive games too. Like I said, the Ohio State game, the Big Ten championship game, and then a playoff game too. Ran for a combined 520 yards. So at number 9 is Donovan Edwards, and like I said, the best number 2 running back in college football. At number 8 was a guy that, like Will Shipley, wasn't initially on my list, but as I go back and watch more of his freshman tape, he definitely deserved a place on this list, and that is TreVeyon Henderson from Ohio State. He was absolutely dominant as a true freshman in 2021. He ran for 1,251 yards, 15 touchdowns as a true freshman too. A broken bone, though, caused him to miss 5 games this past season. He finished with only a 73.9 grade, but if he can get back to that true freshman form, he can move up a lot higher than number 8 on this list. Henderson is a natural pass catcher. He caught 27 of his 29 targets in 2021, his freshman season, for 312 yards. If he can bounce back, not only could be one of the best running backs in the country, he could also be the top running back in the 2024 NFL draft. He's got elite speed, and he's a really good all-around back, and I just want to see him healthy before I put him any higher on this list. At number 7 is a guy who really burst onto the scene as a true freshman like TreVeyon Henderson did a couple years ago. That is Nicholas Singleton from Penn State. He was a 5-star recruit in the 2022 class, the number 1 running back as well, lived up to the hype this past season. He averaged 4.6 yards after contact per attempt, which were the second most in the Power 5 this past season. His 6.8 yards per carry were tied for 4th. He's a home run threat every single time he touches the ball. And not only was Singleton a star freshman running back for Penn State, they also had another freshman who really shined in their backfield in Quinshon Allen. So Penn State's backfield is set for at least the next 2 years with those 2 there. At number 6 is a guy that I don't think many people are talking about enough, and that is Trey Benson from Florida State. He was historically dominant as a tackle breaker this past season. He forced a missed tackle on 51% of his carries this past year, which not only led all running backs in the country, it broke the PFF record, and we've been doing this since 2014. The guy right behind him was Javonte Williams in 2020, forced to miss tackle on 48% of his attempts. And Travis Etienne and Jordan Mason were right behind him too. So, yeah, Trey Benson as a tackle breaker, historic in terms of how often he broke a tackle when he received the ball. The only issue with Trey Benson and why he's maybe number 6 on this list is really his workload. So he transferred in from Oregon. He actually didn't even have 1,000 rushing yards this past season because he only got 154 carries. But still, like I mentioned, the forced missed tackles, he forced 79 missed tackles this past season, which was 3rd in the Power 5 behind only Bijan Robinson and Chase Brown, who are both in the NFL now. Both of those players had over 100 more carries than Trey Benson did. So, amazing tackle breaker. Hopefully, Florida State gets him the ball more this upcoming season. I think he could really emerge as not only one of the best running backs in the country, but also in the 2024 draft. At number 5 is Braelon Allen from Wisconsin, who really has no issues with his workload. He has 415 carries and 2,500 rushing yards over the last 2 seasons, which lead all returning Power 5 running backs. Those were also his first 2 seasons of college football, and he came into Wisconsin as a 17-year-old true freshman. So this guy is still going to be 19 years old in his junior year, and he's been incredible over his first couple years. He could stand to improve his elusiveness, though. He forced him his tackle on 22% of his carries this past season, which were tied for 47th among Power 5 running backs. He's a workhorse, though, and one that head coach and offensive coordinator Phil Longo and head coach Luke Fickell should really rely on next year in that Badgers offense. And keep an eye out for a Braelon Allen interview coming very soon on this channel. I was able to talk to him, and he was a fantastic interview. So the interview for that should be coming out pretty soon. At number 4 is another guy that not a lot of people are talking about too much, Bucky Irving from Oregon. He's one of the most electric running backs in college football this past season. He forced a missed tackle on 43% of his attempts, which was 2nd in the country behind, of course, Trey Benson, who we mentioned earlier. And not only that, it was also 5th all-time for PFF in terms of forced missed tackle rates. So Bucky Irving was a fantastic tackle breaker for Oregon this past season. Again, like Trey Benson, the only issue was kind of workload. He only had 157 carries this past season, which were tied for 67th in the nation, and only 17 more than his teammate Noah Whittington. And Whittington is coming back to Oregon next year, so Oregon will likely again employ a committee backfield next season, but hopefully Bucky Irving can kind of shine more on that offense because he really is electric. At number 3 is Raheim Sanders from Arkansas, who's a bigger back, but his nickname is Rocket because he's stupid fast. I mean, he is 16 carries that he had last year that went for 20 plus yards, which were tied for the 2nd most in the Power 5. Now, the argument against Raheim Sanders that the Arkansas offensive line was dominant. He averaged 3.4 yards before contact per attempt, which led the Power 5 and was 3rd among all running backs in the country. Now, the other argument for that stat, though, is that he was so fast that he could get through the line so fast and pick up some yards that way. It's a little bit of both. The offensive line was dominant. Raheim Sanders also very fast, despite being a bigger running back. Number 2, another SEC running back on this list, and the only true sophomore on this list, and that is Nicholas Singleton was the other one, but the best true sophomore on this list is Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. He was arguably the best newcomer in college football this past season. His 88.2 grade was tied for the best among Power 5 true freshmen with Michigan cornerback Will Johnson, who we'll get into in a future list. But Quinshon Judkins, former 3-star recruit, not a lot of people expected him to be this superstar, especially with Zach Evans transferring in from TCU. Evans was thinking, hey, I'll finally be the lead back, and unfortunately for him, Quinshon Judkins ended up being an absolute superstar. He was top 10 in the FBS as a true freshman in rushing attempts, rushing yards, yards after contact, and forced missed tackles. He also had 91 combined rushing first downs and touchdowns, which were the 4th most in college football. This is the guy that you should expect to see at number 1 on this list next season. But actually at number 1 on this list this season is Blake Corum the running back from Michigan who broke the record for PFF for the highest graded season that we've ever seen from a Power 5 player. He received a 96.2 grade this past season from PFF. That beats every Power 5 player we've ever seen at PFF. And the other guys behind him were Kyle Pitts, Chase Young, and Quinnen Williams. All three of those guys received a 96 grade in their final seasons of college football. All three of those guys went on to be top 5 picks in their respective NFL drafts. Blake Corum likely won't be a top 5 pick because he plays running back, and also he's returning to school too. So I'm really excited to see what Blake Corum has in store this upcoming season. I think he's easily the best running back in college football and one of the best players in college football as well. I think he's a really good dark horse Heisman bet if you want to make one right now. I think he's probably a top 5 Heisman candidate heading into next season, but the odds makers don't have him that way. But he had 96 combined rushing first downs and touchdowns, second most in the country, behind only Minnesota's Mo Ibrahim, who had 72 more carries than Blake Corum. So he should be on the short list to win the Heisman Trophy. Like I said, Blake Corum easily the best running back in college football, and he could have made a case last year that he deserved the Heisman Trophy. That's how good he was last year for Michigan, and he should once again be the workhorse for Michigan, along with Donovan Edwards next season. But there it is, my top 10 running backs in college football. I'm sure all of you have thoughts on this list, so let me know in the comments below what you think, but that's what I got, and I'll see you guys next time.